This video essay is entitled No Selfish Genes. We humans are storytelling animals. Now, to be sure, that's not all that we are, but storytelling is central to human nature. Everything we do is informed by or an imitation of the stories we tell ourselves. One of the things Christian leaders got wrong in the mid to late 20th century, and in part why we lost the cultural wars, is because we thought that what was at stake was simply cold, hard facts. We thought this was purely an intellectual debate. We thought that if we could assemble the most facts, document them, and present them in compelling ways, that we would win the day. What we neglected was the imagination, and one of the first areas we surrendered was the realm of the arts. After all, what did it matter if a deconstructionist was teaching English Lit at the local university? How are storytellers, dealing with Byron and Shelley and Shakespeare, going to shape the world? We would focus on economics, business affairs, and hard science. Who should care if in the fine arts department progressives were dismantling Western culture? Yet the most logical philosopher of the West, Plato, once said, "Give me the songs of the nation, and I care not who makes its laws." Stories capture the imagination of a culture and move the world in ways no logical argument ever could. Ian McGilchrist makes the argument that left-brain thinking is leading to the collapse of Western civilization. According to McGilchrist, the Enlightenment has been taken to such an extreme with an overfocus on reason that we've destroyed the soul of the culture by neglecting literature, its fine arts, its poetry, and even its spirituality. I would add that Christian leaders, especially those of us that think of ourselves as intellectual leaders, have contributed to this collapse by failing to take more seriously the imagination and spiritual formation. I'll leave a link on my blog post at fmccollierville.org to this fine video article. So take, for example, the Wesleyan movement. You have two great founders, John Wesley, the preacher, the organizer, and his brother, Charles Wesley, the poet and songwriter. A minimal number of people can quote John Wesley's sermons, but millions of people throughout the world can sing Charles' songs by heart. So who has had the longest, deepest impact on the movement? The imagination matters as much as the hard facts. So we must attend to the stories, not least because some of the most influential critics of Christianity and purveyors of secular ideology are brilliant storytellers. Take Richard Dawkins, a very clever man of science who frequently dons the habit of a scientist while slyly slipping into the role of the storyteller, all the while pretending that he's still doing science. An example can be found in his book, The Selfish Gene, where he tells a story about how genetic material controls people in a way similar to how an astronaut might control a spaceship. This story about genes piloting human robots and other stories like it have a way of slipping into the narrative by which we all live. And left unexamined and unchallenged, these stories slip into our canon of well-established facts from which we conduct our lives. In his book, The Selfish Gene, Dawkins dismantles the notion of traditional morality, not through hard science, but through storytelling. David Bentley Hart, a brilliant theologian, philosopher, and a man of science, writes in his brilliant book, The Experience of God. He points out with great clarity what's wrong with this argument. He writes, Richard Dawkins most memorably describes what genes do. Now they swarm in huge colonies, he writes, safe inside of gigantic lumbering robots sealed off from the outside world, communicating with torturous indirect routes, manipulating it by remote control. They are in you. They are in me. They created us, body and mind, and their preservation is the ultimate rationale for our existence. Then compare Denis Noble's elegant inversion of its central conceits. Now, they are trapped in huge colonies, locked in highly intelligent beings molded by the outside world, communicating with it by complex processes through which, blindly, as if by magic, function emerges. They are in you and in me. We are the system that allows our codes to be read, and their preservation is totally dependent on the joy we experience in reproducing ourselves. We are the ultimate rationale for their existence. Now, what precisely is the difference between these two approaches to genetic theory? Dawkins has graciously granted that Noble's revision of his text is every bit as plausible as the original, and that it really is all a matter of perspective in the end, which is a significant concession since it means that the original text is making claims that are not empirical but only picturesque. In fact, though the two passages are comparably plausible, colorful though it is, Noble's language is largely literally true, and that of Dawkins, by contrast, is metaphorical all the way down. Lumbering robots, manipulation, remote control, they created us. All of this is winsome enough, even a little quaint in a 1950s science fiction sort of way, but more or less nonsensical as well. Rhetorically speaking, it is a splendid example of the pathetic fallacy, the naive habit of attributing human motives and intentions to non-human objects. It certainly describes nothing real, or even analogously real. Especially fanciful are the ridiculous robots, since they are precisely the sort of things that we human beings, capable of conscious intentions, most definitely are not. The image does, however, make obvious how very mechanistic a metaphor the selfish gene really is. What I would like to do now is simplify David Bentley Hart's argument by attempting to paraphrase it so that an 8th grader might be able to understand it. My point is not to pander or talk down to my audience, but simply to take some of the hard-to-understand jargon out of this very technical work. Here we go, the 8th grade paraphrase. Richard Dawkins and Dennis Noble both describe genes, but in different ways. Dawkins says that genes are like tiny controlling agents, hiding inside of our bodies like little pilots, controlling robots, directing everything we do. He even suggests that our main purpose in life is to keep these genes alive. Dennis Noble, on the other hand, sees things differently. He describes genes as passive codes that are trapped inside of intelligent beings like us. Instead of genes controlling us, he argues that we shape them. Our actions, our choices, even the joys we experience in life affect how genes continue from one generation to the next. The big difference between these views is that Dawkins uses metaphor, an imaginative way of speaking that makes genes seem like they have thoughts and plans and goals. But genes don't actually think or want anything. They are strings of molecules that are chemical compounds that contain information. Noble's way of describing them is more accurate because it recognizes that genes don't act on their own. Instead, they exist within living beings that make choices, that build relationships, and interact with the world. Here's Hart's argument. Hart argues that the idea of selfish genes is misleading because it gives genes too much credit. Genes don't control us, we control them. For example, a mother doesn't love and care for her child because her genes force her to. She does it because she truly loves her child, and because of that love, her genes happen to survive to the next generation. In the end, Hart suggests that instead of calling them selfish genes, it would be more accurate to call them fortunate or lucky genes. They don't guide evolution. Rather, life itself, through love, through choices, through relationships, determine which genes get passed on. Our DNA isn't a hidden script controlling us. It's a record of how life unfolded, shaped by the actions of real living beings. Hart points out that Dawkins' way of describing genes, calling them selfish, or saying they manipulate us, is just a metaphor. It's not a scientific fact. Genes don't actually have thoughts, desires, or goals. They are simply molecules that contain instructions for building proteins, and those proteins help build and sustain living things. The way we live, love, and make choices is not dictated by our genes, but rather our genes continue to exist because of the choices and conditions that allow life to flourish. Hart's key point is this: it's misleading to say that genes are selfish or that they want to survive. It would be more accurate to say that they are fortunate, that they are privileged because they get passed on when life conditions support them. In other words, genes don't drive us. We, as thinking, feeling creatures, make choices, and our genes continue to exist because of these choices. Again, a mother doesn't love her child because the genes program her to. She loves them because she's capable of love, and as a result, her genes get passed on. Thinking of DNA as a record of our history rather than as a secret controlling force helps us to see life more accurately. Psalm 139, verses 13 through 14. O Lord, you created me in my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well.